Medicine preaches, hey, well, you have a thyroid issue. This is what your life looks like. Women deserve better, and we are being robbed of the best, most joyous years of our lives just because we're being told that this is normal and this is what life is supposed to look like. And it does not have to be that way.
McCall, you've dedicated so much of your time to helping people understand their thyroid. How did you get to that point, though? I'm sure that's not where you started. You didn't come straight out of, learning and straight into let's just focus on thyroid. What was the process?
In part, it was my own pain to purpose story. So I was 27 when I was absolutely debilitated with my own thyroid issue and was coming home from work every day and going to bed at 3:30 in the afternoon and literally flat on my back. Any moment I wasn't at work, I was like resting to recover, resting to prepare. And like so many people that struggle with thyroid dysfunction, went to my doctor, said, hey, look, I'm on Synthroid. This doesn't seem to be working. I have all these symptoms of hypothyroidism. I already had a medical license. So, I was pretty certain, hey, this really seems a lot like thyroid, and was, like many women, completely blown off, sent away, dismissed, told to eat less, exercise more. They tried to put me on Lipitor at 27 for my high cholesterol that was just due to my thyroid problem. I waited around 9 months before I could find someone to help me, waited 3 months to see him, eventually got my life back. And he became actually a really big mentor to me, taught me a lot about progressive thyroid care. This was a long time ago when that didn't really exist. And I started devouring everything I could in the literature, started just kind of analyzing my own patients and analyzing their data. And what's so strange, I don't normally share this part of my story, but I was practicing integrative psychiatry. So I was dealing with people with treatment-resistant depression and anxiety and bipolar. And I had enough treatment-resistant depression patients that took my information after fixing them for thyroid dysfunction as their root cause and spread my information all over the internet on thyroid advocacy platforms. And they actually built my thyroid practice without me ever even writing on my website that I treated thyroid issues. It was honestly crazy. Finally, someone flew in from out of state to see me for the first time in 2015. And I was just thought to myself, I think this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I think I'm doing the wrong thing. And from that, Modern Thyroid Clinic was born. And now I get to spend my days helping women get their lives back who are just how I once was.
Do you predominantly specialize in women?
I mean, like 99.9% of our patients are women.
And why do you think that is?
It's a great question. So I definitely think women are more prone to autoimmune diseases, and a lot of thyroid issues are autoimmune in nature. So I think we're a little hardwired for that. I also think, honestly, we pay attention a little bit better. We are in tune with our body. We are more invested in our health, sadly, than men are. The male patients that we have, almost ubiquitously are brought to us by their partners. So we help women with thyroid and hormone dysfunction. Those are our people.
It's so great, though, that the way that you're looking at thyroid is finally getting what it needs. It seems like, well, it's like everything, really. We don't know what we don't know until we know. But then there's been somebody out there advocating for such a long time in a holistic way, or in a way that's actually, I don't know whether we say it's zoomed out or zoomed in. It's kind of like both, really, isn't it? But it's still so misunderstood. And do you find that?
The studies are being geared towards treating less people, saying that a huge subset of people who are being treated shouldn't be treated. And they are perpetually at this point, as of since 2018, a study came out that now over 300 studies have been based on, that is advocating for not treating people until their TSH is above 10, sometimes even 20. Well, by the time someone's TSH is 10, they're on disability. Like, these people are non-functioning humans, non-functioning members of their families and society. And medicine is very, very worried about people being overtreated for thyroid dysfunction, when in the reality, not enough people are being treated. We are waiting far too long, and it's taking a huge toll on the prime years of our lives, but also even on the healthcare system economically.
Yeah, absolutely. For those that are listening that maybe aren't familiar with symptoms, where do we start with that? Because the fun part about thyroid is, like, every part of your body needs your thyroid to work properly. Mm-hmm. So the symptoms are really wide and varied. But for those people that don't know, I'll let you list the most common symptoms that you see.
Fatigue, brain fog, weight gain, hair loss, low libido, poor digestion like constipation, very often dry skin, brittle nails, brittle hair, cold intolerance, kind of loss of the outer portion of your eyebrows, elevations in cholesterol, elevations in blood sugar. You'll get told you have prediabetes, those sorts of things.
And what about mood-wise? Because you mentioned that connection.
Totally. Depression is
Yeah.
very common, and even anxiety. So I find anyone with a thyroid issue can have anxiety. I find it disproportionately higher among people that have hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's. They
Right.
very, very commonly have anxiety. And I've even seen studies on bipolar being diagnosed. I haven't run across that myself, but it has been documented.
Mm. So the anxiety is the symptom, not
Mhm.
the and how often are people being treated for anxiety when it's actually a symptom of a thyroid problem?
All the time. I mean, I think women, especially perimenopause, menopause women, they are massively missing the mark, and they are simply treating for anxiety with antidepressants, anti-anxiety meds, for thyroid and hormone dysfunction all the time, all the time.
It's still crazy to me, but I'm like you, like we're treating thyroid not in the same way that you are treating a patient. But let's walk through what it looks like. Someone comes in, obviously you're looking, your lab work's really important, right? We were just
Mhm.
talking about this because I had sent you my lab work, but you'd only just got it. And also the ranges are different, which is true, they are. What I find so crazy, and maybe you can speak to what you see as values and maybe I can try and translate them. But what's normal and what is optimal are worlds apart. And is this where people are getting it wrong from the beginning, do you think?
I think there's 3 steps where medicine is getting it wrong. One is, we're only checking TSH and we need a full thyroid panel. Like, gauging someone's thyroid function by way of their TSH, especially when it comes to medication management, I describe it as throwing darts at a dartboard blindfolded, hoping to hit a bullseye. If it happens and you feel great, go buy a lottery ticket because it's 1 in a million. Most people instead are walking around plagued with thyroid symptoms for their entire lives. So first it's that, and then it's normal versus optimal. I'm a perfect example. Honestly, pretty much 100% of our patients at Modern Thyroid Clinic are also a perfect example of people who have been told, oh my gosh, your thyroid labs are normal. Your symptoms are actually not due to your thyroid at all because your labs say they're not because they're normal, and send you on your merry way. Go eat less, exercise more, kind of a situation. You can be debilitated and be within a normal, quote, range for thyroid. And it goes deeper than that, Nat, because there is no true standardized range, at least not in America. I can speak to that, and I think it's the same in Australia, New Zealand. Everything depends on what the lab says is normal. There's no national thing that says, okay, this is what your T3 should be. This is what your T4 should be. No, it's a series of averages based on people going to the labs, getting their blood drawn. And inherently, there's a few problems with that. One is who's going to the lab, not people who wake up and feel so wonderful that they just want to check and see what their thyroid function is doing that day, right? These are people who are symptomatic. They're trying to solve a problem. They're going to the lab to get answers. So they are sick people that we are now basing our normal, or what medicine would say optimal, ranges on. And they're far, far, far too wide. So, over the years, I've slowly, based on literally hundreds of thousands of pieces of data from our patients, narrowed our ranges down more and more and more over the last decade. And now our ranges are this wide. But if people are in them, they thrive, they feel good, they have a metabolism, they get their lives back, they can function and enjoy life. So normal, my biggest thing that I always tell people is never, ever believe a clinician when they look at you and they say, your labs are normal. It's not your thyroid, because most of the time that's just not true.
And it's exactly the same in Australia. The labs decide the reference ranges. Ours, depending, it's 0.5 to 5 for TSH is considered the range. I think it's the same for you guys.
It varies per lab, but roughly.
Yeah. And then I know that it was updated about 20 years ago to be something
exactly.
like 0.3 to 4. Functionally, I don't know, again, what you guys say, but we say somewhere from 0.5 to 3.
I say even more narrow.
Right? Yes, totally.
Yeah.
But for me in clinic, I want patients to sit somewhere around 1.
Yep.
And that's only TSH, right? We're
Right.
not talking about your other thyroid hormones and how they impact. We've talked about TSH, which maybe we should actually unpack the hormones that people don't know about. But TSH is the one that your doctor will probably happily test you for. And that's another challenge too. Do you find this, McCall? It's whoever's requesting, if they don't know to request more than just TSH, or they request, in Australia, if you request a full thyroid panel and your TSH is fine, Medicare will not continue to test for your other thyroid markers.
It's not that way here. What's fascinating here is generally it's shut down by doctors and they say, no, we don't need to check that. There's no data behind it. There's lots of data behind it. And they say
Why
your
do you
insurance
think
won't
that is?
cover
Sorry
it.
to cut you off, but why do you think that the doctor says there's no need?
Well, in our medical training, it is very clear that we only need to check TSH. And so they're simply not educated. Even endocrinologists. I had our clinical director, who's a board certified endocrinologist, on my podcast a couple of weeks ago. She literally was never trained about the physiology of how thyroid hormones work. So everyone's like, you're not an endocrinologist. How can you speak to it? It's like, well, I had the same education for thyroid that they do. How do I know? Because I went to one and I asked them and I told them what mine was. I compared it to hers. It was the same. So we're trained literally to only check TSH. We can check TSH and T4. Those two numbers almost always correlate with one another. So again, we're not getting to useful information yet, or the most useful information that's needed. And then I think they also don't know how to interpret it. So they don't want to order things they don't know how to speak to.
I understand that too. As a practitioner, if you came to me and you asked me to order something that I didn't know how to help you with, then I would be like, well, I can order that, but I don't know what to do next, which I think that's probably where referring on to somebody that does is really important. I think that step is often missing. Let's talk about the main thyroid hormones just really quickly for people that are listening that might not know what they are. We've talked about TSH. I'll let you do this. You can tell us what TSH is.
So TSH is your thyroid stimulating hormone. It's actually a hormone that is secreted from your brain that communicates to your thyroid, ideally, in a low state of hormone production, of actual thyroid hormone production, because again, TSH is not a thyroid hormone. When those output hormones are low, supposedly TSH should increase. And when output hormones are good or elevated, TSH should decrease, meaning you need less stimulation of your thyroid to produce these output hormones. Research shows there's a mismatch of output hormones in TSH about 35% of the time, way more than that. And if anyone is on levothyroxine, Synthroid, medications that are levothyroxine based or T4 based, TSH is almost completely unreliable at that point. So I view TSH as the energy your body is using to create energy, meaning what is your energy input versus output? So if your TSH is really high, if it's 5, you're using too much energy to produce energy, and you're going to be in a deficit irrespective of what these hormones are. So TSH should always be reasonable. My range is 0 to 1.8, ideally closer to 1. So that's your TSH. Your free T4 is your inactive hormone. So your TSH stimulates your thyroid. Your thyroid secretes free T4. Your free T4 then needs to be activated to be usable. Okay, that is a very important step that most people do not do well this day and age. I describe T4 like crude oil. It's inactive, it's inert. We don't put crude oil in our car to make it run. We need crude oil to make gasoline to put in our car to make it run. But guess what? If someone gives us an endless amount of crude oil and we don't have the capabilities to effectively convert it into gasoline, what do we have? We have a garage full of crude oil and a car that has a gas tank on empty. And that's what's happening for the vast majority of people in the world. Sadly, the mainstream, medical model only will treat thyroid patients, or 99.9% of them, with crude oil hormone, with levothyroxine only. So all inactive thyroid hormone, which is why myself, so many of my patients, so many people probably listening, are on medication. They go up, they go down in dose. They're persistently symptomatic because they're not converting it into gasoline. Just continuing on, your T4 in an ideal scenario will convert to T3, your gasoline hormone, your active hormone, what regulates your energy, your mood, your digestion, your cholesterol, your blood sugar. And you have to convert that crude oil to gasoline to make it effective, and that is your free T3 hormone. Almost no one checks free T3. Only 10% of the prescriptions in America include some form of T3, which means 9 out of 10 people are on medications that most people aren't able to effectively activate. And then the last hormone is an inhibitory hormone. Okay, it's called reverse T3. And to make it simple, for those of you watching video-wise, reverse T3 and T3 are like our hands. You can hold them out there the same shape in an opposite orientation. So uniquely, what that allows reverse T3 to do is land and bind in the same landing spot as your active thyroid hormone, as your gasoline hormone, your free T3. But instead of activating that landing spot for something like your energy, your cognition, your mood, it sits there and it blocks the landing spot and does not allow T3 to bind. So the higher that reverse T3 is, the lower T3 absorption you get. And sadly, that inhibitory hormone directly comes from crude oil. So again, a lot of the reason why people on levothyroxine, synthroid-based medications don't feel well, they're sequestering their crude oil hormone. They're actually simply creating a place to manufacture your inhibitory hormone as opposed to activating that T4.
Obviously, antibodies and looking at some type of autoimmune illness. We should list some of those and you can talk to that as well. What else influences the thyroid to not work effectively as it could?
Yeah. So a lot of things, but your body's choice to activate or not activate your thyroid hormones is a purposeful mechanism. So think about it. Think about when you're sick, you can sleep way longer than you normally can. You can lay in bed and fall asleep and wake up all day for 24 hours, right? One of the mechanisms of making you tired so that you lay down, rest, and recover is the halting the activation of your thyroid hormones. So think about things that your body would want to drive that basically go into hibernation mechanism. So when you're sick, when you're not eating enough, when you're inflamed, when you're micronutrient depleted, calorically restricted, protein restricted, when you're over exercising, when you're not sleeping, when you're stressed, when you're pregnant, when you're breastfeeding, when your liver isn't functioning properly. Like these are things that will purposefully say, you know what? I want you to lay down, rest, and recover. So I'm going to make you tired and I'm not going to activate your thyroid hormones so that you lay down, rest, and recover.
And then those that actually have a known autoimmune condition,
Mhm.
Hashimoto's, Sjogren's, what are some of the others that are associated with thyroid?
Yeah. So Graves, hyperthyroidism is another form of thyroid, dysfunction that triggers very different symptomology, the opposite, like anxiety, palpitations, and weight loss and sweating and that sort of thing. But any autoimmune disease that someone might have puts them at an increased risk for developing a thyroid autoimmune disease or vice versa. Like when you have one, you're at a 30% increased risk of developing another. So I would say anyone that's walking around with vitiligo, lupus, any slew of these autoimmune diseases needs to be really careful and monitor if they also have Hashimoto's, because again, sadly, in America, many people are never being screened for Hashimoto's because they don't think there's anything that we can actually do to influence it falsely.
And then that makes me think about, okay, there's obviously other factors at play as well. And as we get older, women start to present with changes in their hormones. I guess it's their hormones changing, but these other influences are really something that gets dismissed often but probably should be looked at more. What are we seeing what do you see with women as they get older and changes in their thyroid?
There is a substantial and significant risk for an increase in incidence or an increase in the likelihood that you'll develop a thyroid condition postmenopausally. And I think that bleeds into perimenopause, but the data is just harder to collect on these perimenopausal women because there is no timestamp that we can firmly say, oh, you're in perimenopause. Whereas in menopause, in medicine, we can define it. So I think absolutely these hormonal shifts create a few different dynamics. One, it creates increases in inflammation. Drops in estrogen, swings in estrogen directly correlate with inflammation, which puts you at risk for Hashimoto's and therefore hypothyroidism. Metabolic changes. Hormone dysfunction also influences our ability to utilize, metabolize, make available our thyroid hormones. So these things are intricately intertwined. In fact, reverse engineering the conversation is what percentage of my patients also have hormone dysfunction? I would venture to say well over 90, well
Yeah.
over 90%, maybe even 95.
It's fascinating to me. I've recently, I'm always an advocate for getting testing done. And I think as we especially go through the changes, probably from our mid-30s right through to our mid-50s, I really think it's important to have regular testing so you can reflect on what your body is showing you. For the last however long, as everybody else is doing, and what I do for work skews my perception of things and where to look, I've really been diligently focusing on my hormones, my sex hormones. And what's really interesting to me is in the last sort of maybe month, I'm like, it's not my sex hormones, it's my thyroid, and really shifting the focus. But I wonder how many other women are doing what I did. My sex hormones weren't great either. I've improved those. And this is now what we're left with. And now I'm going, oh, wow, I've been looking in the wrong place all this time.
It's
Crazy
like it's
to me.
both and,
Right?
because with thyroid comes hormone dysregulation and vice versa. So it truly, it is both and a lot of people want to start in one place and then venture to the secondary place. So it's not like you did anything wrong, but
No, and
gosh, simultaneously is best, right?
Absolutely. What's been interesting is that I have, done everything I can to try and improve my sex hormones, and they have improved so much with just lifestyle changes. And now I can see what I'm left with. And I wonder what would have happened had I not have done that. I probably would have been prescribed hormones to supplement when in actual fact that's not even the issue. So it's widely interesting to me. But I think it's also about being able to have the right pair of eyes and ask the right questions and just keep on looking and not taking you're fine for an answer. I do want to discuss a lot of women during pregnancy will have issues with their thyroid. A lot of women with fertility challenges will have issues with thyroid. Why is that?
I think their thyroid is manifesting as fertility issues. And in the States, medicine views, fertility and thyroid pretty late, meaning we wait to intervene with these women on their thyroid until it's really late. And then that's manifesting as inability to get pregnant or recurrent miscarriages. And it's devastating. And women who are pre-pregnancy planning need to be extraordinarily, like I'm neurotic with my regular patients. You give me a woman that's either pre-pregnancy planning or pregnant, and my level of neuroses 10x's, because they just need everything to be optimized. And medicine won't think, gosh, they won't even believe that someone has fertility issues from thyroid until their TSH is well above 5, probably closer to 10. And I see these issues at a TSH of 2.5. Like these are very, very delicate phases of a woman's physiology. And then, yes, postpartum thyroiditis, meaning like this transient, a lot of times transient, autoimmune thyroid reaction is the most common time to get Hashimoto's, to get this autoimmune thyroiditis. And a lot of women, again, are flying under the radar, and it's manifesting as postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, inability to get their life back postpartum. And really they're dealing with an undiagnosed thyroid issue that's no one is properly screening for.
That was me. That was awful. And also, especially first baby, you don't know. You've got no idea. You just think this is how the postpartum period is. And I remember I was so thin, so thin. And what does everyone say? You look amazing. And I used to be like, I feel like I'm dying inside. But this is obviously just how people feel after having a baby. And I mean, you don't know. And then it wasn't until the second time around, I'm like, I know what's going on here, actually. But it feels awful. And there's a whole cascade of challenges that come with that. But my question here is, if I had postpartum hypothyroid, does that speak to anything that I'm what's the word I'm looking for? Prone to in the future? Like, does that say, okay, you actually genetically do probably have an underlying thyroid issue because I've developed that under similar circumstances, whether it's stress or whatever it might be? Am I more likely, is the word I'm looking for, to develop some type of thyroid illness if I don't look after myself?
I would love to pull data on that because I don't have it. I would say certainly yes, right? I mean, my gut would say physiologically, absolutely. Like you are flipping a switch on and on that you're likely hardwired for. And so if that was a vulnerable time in your physiology and you hit another vulnerable time in your
Mm.
physiology, I would say the likelihood would be absolutely you're at more of a risk than someone who's never had Hashimoto's previously. But I'd be so curious to actually know the
Yeah.
numbers and stats on that.
What happens at that point in time? I never had, I just look back at labs and can see, but I never had antibodies tested. If someone has antibodies, doesn't matter how low lying they are, is that an indicator of anything? Or does anyone have no antibodies? We probably should talk about what antibodies actually are.
Yeah, so let's do it. Antibodies for Hashimoto's, which is the autoimmune component of thyroid dysfunction that very often leads to hypo or low functioning thyroid, are thyroid peroxidase antibody and thyroglobulin antibody. If you have either or of those at certain levels, it means you have Hashimoto's. Now, there are people walking around with zero antibodies.
There are?
Truly a
Okay,
fair, oh
interesting.
yeah, a fair amount of people are. And then there are people who are walking around with low level antibodies below the threshold of a true diagnosis for Hashimoto's. So that could be a thyroglobulin less than 1, but still registering, or TPO less than 34, but still registering. And I would say, again, those people are at risk for going in to Hashimoto's truly more than someone who has no antibodies, right? Then for Graves, the antibodies are different. They're thyroid stimulating immunoglobulins and thyrotropin receptor antibodies, or TREB. And for anyone that happens to have Graves and is listening, these antibodies are extraordinarily important for you to check every time because they correlate identically with the severity of your Graves' disease, with the severity of your hyperthyroidism. So as your antibodies drop, your actual manifestation of overproduction of thyroid hormones drops as well. So tracking that data is extremely powerful. And sadly, again, no one's doing this. Often they're not even ever checking these antibodies in people they suspect have hyper or Graves.
Really, there's three main things if we kind of categorized. A stress of some description, antibodies, and then an event like pregnancy or a sickness, I guess. The three main things that you could trigger a thyroid illness for most people. Am I right?
I would say, yeah. And then there's other things in mold,
Yes.
acute viral. I've seen cases of Hashi and both Graves post-COVID, like a significant viral infection. Those sorts of things can certainly propagate it and put you at an increased risk as well.
Did you find after people that had COVID exposure, or for some people even being vaccinated, triggered predisposed thyroid issues for people?
Yes, because I had people that had new onset Hashimoto's and Graves, especially
Crazy.
Graves. It was pretty interesting time because Graves is a reasonably rare condition. And all of a sudden we had a flood of new Graves patients over those years.
So much inflammation in the body at that point in time that it just triggered. We had so many reignited people that were, I don't even use the word in remission. I always just use symptom-free. Like they were living without a problem and things be reignited. To that point, can people live symptom-free that do have a thyroid illness? Because I think we really hold on to I just have a thyroid issue as if that's my life now.
Oh my God, Nat, I love that you asked this question. So our whole motto at Modern Thyroid Clinic is that there's no reason to still have thyroid symptoms. So medicine preaches, hey, well, you have a thyroid issue. This is what your life looks like. That does not have to be what your life looks like. Now, if you adapt the regular medical model and you only check TSH and you only get T4 treatment and you never do a full thyroid panel, you never address your Hashimoto's, sure, like you could be condemned for a life with a life of thyroid symptoms. But if you get in the right hands, you get the right partner in your health, you're on the right medication at the right dose at the right time, working on your lifestyle, a life full of energy and vitality and thriving truly is possible. And that's really my mission in life, is to spread that message because women deserve better and we are being robbed of the best, most joyous years of our lives just because we're being told that this is normal and this is what life is supposed to look like. And it does not have to be that way.
In terms of, obviously, you've said, okay, there are certain things that, I mean, there's medications that people obviously can be helpful. What are all the other things that people need to start to consider? Because you and I know that so many people end up, taking some type of thyroxine, let's say, and over time they just need to take more and more and more.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because of all the reasons that you've mentioned that aren't being looked at. But what are some of the things that people, I know it's very difficult because it's an individualized approach, but what are some of the main things people need to consider?
So I'd start with reverse engineering the things that keep you from activating your hormones, right? Reduce your stress, eat a low inflammatory diet, get enough sleep, get a micronutrient dense diet, get enough protein, get enough exercise, but don't overdo it. Right? The basic things that you and I preach about all the time that we want people doing the basics is important. And then, some other things, especially for people with Hashimoto's, with autoimmune thyroid conditions that really tend to work well to reduce antibodies to potentially go into remission, which is possible, is, again, low inflammatory diet. The most common foods that I see, let's say top 2, that drive an autoimmune thyroid condition after testing thousands of these people and looking at inflammatory foods, is dairy is number 1 and gluten is number 2. So get rid of those while keeping in micronutrient dense diet. Things like red light, like simple things. Red light can have an impact on not only antibodies, which it can reduce antibodies for Hashi and Graves. It can also improve thyroid function. It can help you actually activate your T4. It's, simple, easy, accessible, no medication. Selenium is great to reduce antibodies, to help activate your hormones. We need enough iron, making sure we're not walking around chronically iron deficient, which is honestly a reasonably common issue with women. They have whole thyroid supplements you can take from A to Z to get enough micronutrients to facilitate activation, conversion, sometimes even lower antibodies. I recommend staying away from iodine. Glutathione's another great one. There's all these things that we can do to try to manufacture improved function in cases where people are struggling. Sometimes it's successful. Sometimes people need medication.
Iodine. Tell me why people are avoiding it when so many people are told they need it because they're deficient, and that's the reason why they have a thyroid issue.
Right. So that's very in vogue. It is. I can speak to America. I mean, America and most industrialized countries, we no longer have iodine deficiency. It's actually extraordinarily rare. And in fact, most of us are walking around with too much iodine. So increasing iodine actually increases risk for autoimmune thyroid conditions. And one of the ways, if I get a patient's antibodies low, 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 and then they're stuck, they're stagnant, one of the ways that I can move the needle in those really difficult cases is by removing iodine. Dr. Alan Christensen has a book about this, the thyroid reset diet, I think it's called. I've had many patients use that protocol successfully. A lot of the research pro-iodine is based on one person who kind of has a little bit of circular thinking going on. And I think it's been adopted as truth. And I'm not I'm not a believer that it is.
Yeah. Crazy. So crazy.
Yeah.
What about fasting and the thyroid?
Yeah.
Because I don't know that they go hand in hand.
I get this question a lot. So I just did a podcast interview with Cynthia Thurlow and we chatted about this. So fasting has pros and cons, right? I think in my opinion, fasting can reduce antibodies. It can massively reduce inflammation. It can impact our longevity, anti-cancer, anti-aging in a plethora of ways. It can also be done in extreme and be detrimental to our health. So I am actually a huge proponent of intermittent fasting in the thyroid community, not only for inflammation, but because these people are giantly at risk for insulin resistance, leptin resistance, blood sugar dysregulation, high cholesterol, because of poor metabolic function due to hypothyroidism. So fasting is one of the unique lifestyle measures that we can do to try to unravel that metabolic dysfunction. But I think it needs to be balanced, especially with women. So I recommend no more than 4 to 5 days a week, 8-hour eating window, 16-hour fast. always tell women, listen to your body. If you wake up and you're hungry, eat. Either don't fast that day or finish your eating window early. Listen to your body. Do not ever go by this hard, fast, extremist, dogmatic idea of what that looks like. And does that potentially cause some adrenal upregulation? Sure. But you know what really causes chronic adrenal upregulation 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? Chronic inflammation. Just our body cannot catch up on all of the cleanup that it needs to do when we are constantly working on breaking down, assimilating, and excreting food.
So I think for my patients, I encourage them to fast, to always eat breakfast and fast at the end of the day, which is not very social.
Right. And it's harder, but I agree. That's the best case scenario.
I think ideally, waking up, breaking a fast for women, in my experience over time seems to be ideal. But then that eating window obviously then ends pretty early in the day, and then you got to get through the rest of it. It's a bit boring. I really, really love prolonged fast for these reasons.
I know you do.
I do love a prolonged fast.
I do too. Me too, sister. I don't recommend it to most of my patients, but I love it. Personally, it's changed my life.
I think once a year, twice a year maybe, just a reset. I think it works wonders. I think it does a lot, not just physically, but emotionally as well for people. It is hard, and it is something that, I don't advocate for doing in winter. I think you need to do this, or Chinese medicine will tell you definitely don't do it in winter. But I think it can be a really great reset for people. But again, I think we've all got to listen to our bodies. So many women are walking around so stressed that it is really probably the perfect storm, and they're not eating and they're relying on coffee and calling it intermittent fasting.
True. Right. There's a right and wrong way to do it. Absolutely. And the goal is healing. I really am a big proponent of, look, when we're walking around with a thyroid problem, our body's already stressed. We don't need to manufacture extra stress for it to deal with, so you have to be attuned to your body. That's why I also don't recommend prolonged fast to most of my patients. They have to be in that particular unique physiological space with the right support, et cetera.
So for that person that's listening going, okay, I've been on thyroxine for 15 years and I just feel worse and worse and worse and worse. You're telling them that potentially they can put their body into a state of recovery, and that ideally, you want someone on the lowest to no dose of any medication without symptoms, right? That's the aim here.
Of course, but sadly, the people that come to see us,
they can recover, and they don't need to rely on medication necessarily alone for all of their days.
Well, there's two kind of subsets of people. One is people who have truly lost thyroid function. So often those are people with Hashimoto's, a history of breakdown of their thyroid gland, meaning their thyroid gland has been eroded away by antibodies. They're not going to regrow that thyroid tissue. The second subset in that same category is, as we age, we see thyroid function reduce in the same way that we see hormones reduce, right? Those aren't in silos. We kind of lose hormonal function over time. That also needs to be replaced. Those people won't regain that function. But there's a second subset of people who have what I call a pure conversion disorder. They cannot activate their thyroid hormones. They produce them, they make them, they're producing T4, they have extreme difficulty converting their crude oil to gasoline. And those people can often temporarily go on medication, come off long-term, because that allows them to get their lifestyle in check, to work on all of these other cogwheels that influence that mechanism. And those people often can come off of medication long-term. But I would say the vast majority of people truly on thyroid medication are because they've lost hormonal secreting tissue that needs to be replaced. Ideally better than thyroxine. Ideally better than T4.
Thank you so much for being with me here today. Where can people find you if they want to check out your work?
I live on TikTok at McCall McPherson and Instagram at McCall McPherson PA. And then my practice is modernthyroidclinic.com. We have a ton of resources there. And I can share my free lab guide with you too, as well, to just give you what labs people need and what they mean, optimal ranges, etc.
Amazing. McCall, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. This has been awesome. I wish we could have done it in the reels, but we got there.
Next time, my friend. Thanks for having me. It was lovely.